Good morning. Depending on where you are, some interesting conditions meteorologically across the state. I'm going to talk more about that in a second, but I'll start here again looking at the previous week and where we've been. It was another, normal temperatures across northwestern parts of the state for the averages and cooler than normal in as you go south and east from there down to the southeastern lower. So generally a range of around close to the normal to 2 or 3 degrees below the normal. And again, we've had a lot of that kind of weather here in August, and Lyndon made reference to this earlier. Of course, the concern is for that portion of our annual crops that are lagging behind and getting some thermal accumulation, and that August is the second leading month climatologically for our degree day accumulations right after July. It is the second warmest month climatologically, and really need the accumulations. But that said, we are behind normal, the climatology for much of the state, especially across the central and southern lower. It's not very far. It's a few calendar days behind where we typically are at this time of the year. On the right-hand side here, it was another active weather week. Several weather systems have gone through. Actually, they're still going through part of the state as we speak, and much of the state picked up another an inch or better. The yellow here is greater than 2 inches, and I would make note of that because the northwestern, actually it's an area from west central north and eastward up through northwestern lower. That's one of the drier parts of the state and has still been lingered. It missed previous precip events and was still classified as being in either abnormally dry or in drought conditions. In contrast, in stark contrast to many portions in central, eastern, southeastern lower here, where we've got the exact opposite with surplus moisture. So it was a positive thing to see some of that precipitation up in that part of the state here for our annual crops. So again, most areas a wetter than normal week. Well, that brings me to where we are and where we've been, at least over the last day or so. I think most of you have heard all about the heat dome and the upper ridge, and just a couple words about that, because you are literally seeing some history being made here as we go through our briefing here. But this upper ridge refers to this in the upper left-hand side here. This is a map of the jet stream across portion of North America, but the continental U.S., and this big upside down U shape here. Big, huge upper ridge, and huge doesn't do it justice, because by some measures, this has been a record-breaking event in the last several days. And underneath ridges, as most of you know, you watch these briefings and others, if you're under a ridge, you're very, very likely in the mid latitudes to see warmer and typically drier than normal, because air tends to sink under that, and that again, warmth and dryness is what we get from that. That ridge has been around, or variants of it, here for much of the summer. The key issue is that most of the time it's been in areas to our south or to our west. And because of that, Michigan has been under, typically northwesterly flow aloft, and we have not had nearly as much of an influence of this. But of course, again, you look at the headlines and all of the problems with heat, extreme heat, and dryness and drought, etc., that has been associated with this ridge. Well, welcome to this week, because the ridge shifted to the east, and Michigan is right on the northeastern fringe of this, and it's why, at least for part of the state, if you're in the southwestern third of the lower peninsula, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We had a wall of heat and humidity move into the state yesterday in back of a warm front. It's still there. The good news is it's not going to be there much longer, probably less than 24 hours, and then we're going to move back to another pattern. And ultimately, as you'll see here in a couple of minutes, the thought is, we look at our forecast guidance, that this upper air ridge is not going to be around long. It's going to shift back to the west, and that'll put Michigan back under northwesterly flow again and lead to a return, at least in the short term, to some cooler weather. It may be different from that once we move into September, but I'll talk more about that in a second. Now, again, a couple of other things underneath the ridge. These are surface temperature anomalies from normal, all of the reds and other red light colors here. These are all way above normal. We're seeing records broken, actually record minimum, the warmest minimum temperatures. A lot of those records were broke, some of them in Michigan here this morning. And down on the bottom, this is the National Weather Service's all hazards map here recently. Much of the central part of the country are under a variety of different advisories and warnings for excessive heat, dangerous heat. Actually, it's because of the combination of heat and humidity. One more of this is from our EnviroWeather weather station down in Cass County at Cassopolis, and some history being made here. These are 5-minute air temperatures. That's the series in the middle here in red. And then the dew point temperatures, that's on the bottom. That's a direct measure of how much water vapor is in the air, what's the actual humidity. And then the combination of those two, the heat index, sometimes referred to as an apparent temperature, that's what it feels like with a combination of both air temperature and dew point temperature. And if it's a little difficult, I apologize, the numbers are a little small here, but a couple things here that are just noteworthy for this part of the state yesterday when that warm air, hot air moved in. Our dew point temperatures went up and above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is that's the limit. Climatologic, we rarely ever see dew point or humidity levels that high in Michigan. We did yesterday for several hours. When I started my career, and I won't tell you what decade it was, but I was an observer for the National Weather Service, and one of the instrument we had for dew point, the top end of that instrument was 80 Fahrenheit. It was a reason, because it doesn't get above that, or rarely really does. Well, yesterday it did, and over actually a large portion of the Corn Belt, there were some values actually in the mid 80s dew point, which is very rare and would have been records that close as Illinois. Here to our south and west, but combined with air temperatures up in the low 90s, which I think everybody appreciated, it gave us a heat index of above 110. I saw some 112s, even some approaching 115 yesterday. And again, that doesn't happen very often in Michigan. It's still, even now as we speak, in the upper 70s and low 80s for our minimum temperatures. That's very rare for Michigan to be that warm. And those will be records for, again, the warmest overnight temperatures. So if it seems really unusual or abnormal, it's because it is. It's truly something extraordinary. But the ridge that's responsible for that, again, we just looked at, that's not going to be with us very much longer. So to look at the weather map here this morning, the important issue here, thinking about where that ridge was, we've got a stationary frontal boundary across central and southeastern lower Michigan. That is the leading edge of that really hot, humid air. To the north of it, it's much closer to normal. It's still warmer than normal, but not nearly what we have down in the south, with, again, temperatures still in the upper 70s and low 80s. There's an area of showers and thunderstorms that's just leaving the far southeastern portion of the state here, down in the Detroit area and southward. That will be gone within the next couple of hours. That went through last night with more rainfall for the eastern part of the lower peninsula. And here over the next 12 to 24 hours, we're going to see this frontal boundary waver a little bit. It may get a little bit further north today, but then tonight it returns south as a cool front. And note here, far up at the top here, another cool front, high pressure system. It's a Canadian origin, a high pressure system. That's what's headed here for the weekend. So big changes, not too far away. Here's the map for tonight at 8 p.m. You can see the front does push to the south, down towards the Indiana and Ohio state line. That's going to set off showers and thunderstorms. They will be scattered. We won't see widespread uniform rainfall, but because of all of the heat and humidity that's with this, again, just to the south of here, a lot of dynamics to work with. Thunderstorms could be strong to severe, and the primary threats would be hail, heavy rain, and perhaps some damaging wind. So just keep an eye on it. Again, this is not going to be a widespread type of thing, but the possibility, like it was yesterday morning in portions of eastern Michigan, we will see that today, again, mostly over central and southern lower Michigan as the afternoon, probably from the middle of the afternoon through the late afternoon and then early evening as that front makes its way through. That'll be the biggest threat. And then the front by tomorrow morning, you can see, does clear the state, move south. It will bring in at least somewhat or noticeably cooler and less humid air. Up in its place, note, here's the second frontal boundary getting closer. That will come through overnight Friday and into Saturday morning. And here's Saturday morning. You can see that does clear the back of the state. So after today, the scattered showers and thunderstorms, we will see another chance for rainfall tomorrow night. It's beginning in northern parts of the state during the afternoon and then spreading overnight to the south and east. But not much moisture for that system to work with. It will be scattered at best. And the other thing is that any rain that does fall, probably pretty light, less than a quarter of an inch definitely, and many areas will remain dry. But as that front goes through, what will be very noticeable will a major drop in temperature. You can see the high pressure here moving into the south and east, and that's what's going to be with us for the weekend. So we will be looking at, again, high temperatures today in the low and mid 90s down in the far southern part of the state, to the south of the front, near upper 70s to low 80s in the north. Behind that, heat index values once again up in that 110, maybe even 115 range. So again, if you're in the southern part of the state, something to really take that seriously. It is dangerous type heat that we don't see very often here in Michigan, but it will be coming to an end here by tonight and certainly by tomorrow. By Saturday and Sunday, we'll only be looking at highs in the low and mid 70s, and then lows dropping way back to even upper 40s north to low and mid 50s south, and so a couple degrees below normal here for the weekend, and then that continues into the early part of next week. So big changes after tomorrow. And late tomorrow and early Saturday, next chance for rainfall coming probably late on Monday in the north, and then spreading south into the rest of the state by Tuesday. That could be a significant rainfall. We'll have to keep an eye on that, but that would be the next chance for rainfall after tomorrow. In terms of what kind of potential we're talking about for precip totals here, you can see most areas of the state a half to 3/4 of an inch or less, with greatest totals across the central part of the state into the east. That's been the pattern for some time now. I would make the note here, this is I think a little aggressive, and that yes, we probably will see some areas with some heavy precipitation. We could see some 1 to 2 inch values localized here today, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Most areas will see much less than that, but there is the possibility for some heavy rain today. I just don't think it'll be very widespread at all. So this might be a little bit aggressive on terms of area in terms of what actually does fall here during the upcoming week. For reference potential of evapotranspiration, following up on Dr. Dong and our talk about water use, it will depend on where you are, because the totals here for the upcoming week for water needs a little bit below normal for the northern part of the state, and probably a little bit above normal, mostly because of the hot weather here over the next day or two. You can see the daily values ranging from about 1200s in the north to about 16 or 1700s per day on average in the far south. So again, it depends. The southern part of the state will be a little bit above normal for this time of the year. And then finally, moving into beyond this, the medium range has some important trends here to talk about. If you look at the jet stream pattern here that's forecast, the big issue and the most important one, look at where's the upper air ridge. It's been stuck with the lower 48 for many weeks. You can see it shifts westward, and that puts Michigan back under northwesterly flow aloft, and you can see the clear impact of that. It brings Michigan back into cooler than normal mean temperatures. This is for, remember, the last several days during the month of August. Also, just as importantly, this is a fairly dry pattern for us. With northwesterly flow, there will be frontal passages, but not much moisture to work with, so precipitation totals are forecast to be below normal. Now, I typically put on the 8 to 14 day as well if there's a change. An interesting change in the 8 to 14 day is suggested, and that is, while drier than normal conditions are expected to continue in the 8 to 14, so this would be into that first week in September, because of a de-amplification, and anytime we talk about this year, I'll believe it when I see it, because we haven't seen much of that. But it does, the forecast guidance does de-amplify the pattern, and it brings back a normal to above normal mean temperatures for the 8 to 14 days. So that is a significant difference between 6 to 10, 8 to 14, and so possibly suggesting a change in jet stream and weather here as we move into the beginning of September to warmer and drier. But drier than normal is consistent in our forecasts as we're looking at the medium range. And finally, our new long lead outlooks from Climate Prediction Center at NOAA. A couple of changes that are worth noting for the month of September. On the top here, mean monthly temperatures, equal chances, no forecast direction. It was maybe looking at a little bit warmer than normal. Now there's no direction. The big change, really, though, I think, is that they've also moved our precipitation totals into the below normal category for the month of September. That's different than what we saw before, and it follows the medium range forecast guidance that you just saw. I think that's the link between the two. And then for the September through November fall period, the new outlook, it does move us back into the normal to above normal mean temperatures here for the fall, but keeps a little bit of that drier than normal area here in the Great Lakes. So again, shifting towards warmer and drier than normal, which, well, for many activities, it depends on what you have, but that would be somewhat favorable if that shakes out. Again, it also, back to Young-Suk's comments and discussion here, and thinking about water, for some areas of the state that have been missed or that have been relatively dry or are on soils that hold less water, that exactly what Young-Suk talked about with the water needs, there probably will be, given this forecast, some need for water, some additional water late in the season that you might not see in every year if the forecast does verify correctly. So it's just something to think about. Of course, in some spots, areas of the state, we have even standing water. So it just depends on where you are location wise. And with that, finally wrap up here. Again, very active for the next 24 to 36 hours, but then looking at a beautiful week here, or weather-wise weekend here, and then back to cooler and ultimately cooler and drier than normal for the bulk of next week. So I will stop there and transition and introduce next week's speaker, and we're going to shift gears a little bit. We'll have our own Dennis Pennington, our wheat specialist. He's going to be with us to talk about record-breaking wheat yields, something to think about here towards the end of the growing season. So don't miss that. Again, that's a week from today, next Thursday. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Phil here to talk about RUP credits.